You plugged that no-shoot target right there in the white. They were both so close together and you just didn't see your sights. Despite what I said and all that you
Welcome, everyone. I'm Heather Sumlin along with Troy Bassham, and we are here with Steve Anderson. Steve is a master shooter. He is a coach. He is one of our certified coaches with mental management, and he has his own podcast called That Shooting Show. So we have an expert podcaster with us today and an author. He's done everything.
Everything.
All right, so let's get to know Steve a little better. How are you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. We're having fun.
Just a minor correction. It's actually Grand Master, one level above.
Oh, y'all, he's a Grand Master. Tells you that I apparently don't shoot.
It's
I did
fun.
read that, but I didn't recall it 100%
And
correctly.
I'm also the only shooting personality that does musical stuff. I do like shooting songs and things of that nature as well.
Nice. Are you going to play one of your shooting songs for us?
I'm not able to do, I don't know if we can make that work with the technology, but I can certainly send you one and your editor can maybe edit it in.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah,
That'd
I'll
be
send you-
fun. He's nodding over there, so I think that's possible.
Cool.
Yeah. And he's a Van Halen fan. You left that out. He's a Van Halen fan.
Well, I figured we'd get to that.
Or actually, you're the Van Halen fan, I guess.
So Van Halen was, in all seriousness, most hard rock heavy metal is not particularly happy. Most of it's sort of angry, and I was already angry as a young kid after my parents split up. So Van Halen made life fun for me. Like if you go back and listen to Van Halen 2, that's a really fun record from beginning to end. And I just like the idea of being fun and smiling instead of being angry. If you listen to Black Sabbath, you're angry all the time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you listen to Van Halen, you put the window down, you feel the wind in your hair, and life gets better.
Nice. And now I got to go listen to some Van Halen when we're done with this.
I already got 2 songs going back and forth.
Your mood will improve by 10% immediately.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
How to improve mood, Van Halen.
Your mood will literally jump to a whole new level.
Nice one.
Yeah, that was good.
Hey, don't worry about it. If you want another move, it'll come walking in.
It's got what it takes.
Oh my goodness. This is fun already.
We're on a roll.
So mental management has been so huge for me, particularly since I got certified. I'm down 15 pounds since Thanksgiving with mental management.
Oh, nice.
It's made me a better father. It's made me a better husband. It's made me a much better coach. And what I hear from people the most is, I expected this to improve my shooting. I did not expect it to improve my life.
Mm-hmm.
And when people understand the power of controlling their thoughts, it is literally life-changing. I mean, if you can just take that angry thought that you have in daily life and just take a minute and go, okay, is this going to help me or not? Maybe I can change the channel and go to a different thought that's going to help me. Oh, anxiety. Oh, it's phenomenal for mild anxiety. Really, really great for that.
So let's start with that. How did you discover mental management? How did you find out about mental management, and start with that?
So I was a middle of the pack, top level USPSA shooter. I was on what's called the Super Squad. And the Super Squad is where they take the 16 best shooters and put them on the same squad because they know one of these guys is going to win the match. So they put them all together. And after I achieved the rank of Grand Master, they put me on that Super Squad for my very first nationals. So I've never been to nationals before, and now I'm elbow to elbow with the best guys in the world. Okay. But I didn't believe that I was one of them. Okay. I went in there thinking somebody's playing a joke on Anderson, right? They're going to say, oh, you wrote a book. Okay, well, let's just see how you do. So my self-image was not ready for that. And I did do some things to prepare. Like I visualized myself loading my magazines next to those guys. I visualized talking to them. But the problem is the guy that I visualized the most wasn't on that squad. So all my visualization was kind of, but I was like many shooters. I was extremely good, but I didn't understand how I was able to perform well sometimes and not well at other times. I couldn't figure it out. And this was in the very beginning of the internet back in dial-up, So we spent all of our time on forums looking for the secret. What's the secret? If I could just figure out the secret. Mm-hmm. Well, With Winning in Mind had been recommended to me by a very good friend of mine, and I read it, and the first third I thought was written for me. And then I got to the second third where all the big words start coming up, and I'm scratching my head going, okay, anticipation, attitude. And it became a little overwhelming. And now I understand that it's written that way so it can be applied to virtually anything. But I had a hard time connecting it to my sport because I can't think of another sport that's judged on speed and accuracy at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. We have events that measure speed, we have events that measure accuracy, but this one measures both. So we're constantly back then deciding, okay, do I go fast here? Do I slow down? And of course, that wakes up the conscious mind every time you do that, which denies access to subconscious skill, especially if you're lacking confidence. Now you have this trifecta of problems, and you literally wind up going, what do I do? Right? So I called your dad, Lanny, to interview him for my second book as a ruse. I can't afford to go to Texas. I can't afford to take a class. But if I tell him I'm interviewing him for a book, he'll probably talk to me. It worked.
Smart.
It worked. And then the second time I tried that, he goes, why don't you come take a class? And I said, well, Lanny, I've got this book. And he goes, well, obviously you can't ask the book a question because you keep asking me questions. Right. So I eventually sort of figured out my own version of mental management with I just really simplified it. Let's just put it that way. I really simplified it. It was working pretty good. And then when I found out you could be a certified coach, I was all over it because our shooting sports are so full of people that have really good skill, but they can't get access to it when the timer goes off. And they have just enough success with over trying that they think that's the thing, right? They'll have maybe 2 out of 5 good stages, primarily because of confidence, where over trying can be successful, but never for 6 or certainly not 24 stages, right? So it's become a huge passion of mine to help people get access to all the skill they've been working on in training. Because what I tell people is, if you have a mental problem and it goes unsolved and you go practice more, you're literally doing sit-ups for a head wound. You've stabbed yourself in the head, you're bleeding, and you're thinking, what am I going to do? I know, sit-ups. And it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And so we've had so much great success. Numerous national champions have come out of my mental management program. It's just been, as I said, life-changing.
That's so
best money I ever spent, let's put it that way.
That's so cool.
Awesome. So how did you get involved in shooting sports anyway?
I got robbed in a record store. I was managing a used CD store. That's compact disc. You younger viewers will need to go Google that. We used to go buy them. And I was managing a record store. It was pretty close to Christmas. And this young man walks in with his girlfriend. His girlfriend sells me some CDs. He's looking around and he sets off the alarm on the way out. You remember those alarms that used to beep and flash when somebody didn't pay for something? So I said, hey, man, why is my alarm going off? He's like, I don't know. Well, we need to figure this out before you can leave. It wasn't going off when you came in, and it's going off now. And the only thing that'll set those things off is a power drill. It's the only thing. And I knew he didn't have a power drill. And he didn't. He had a K-bar knife. You guys know what a K-bar is? The military knife. It's about this long. And he pulls it out and shows it to me. I said, wow, that's a nice knife, but it ain't going to set off my alarm. Okay. And this was in the height of gangster rap, where everybody wanted to be a gangster. Everybody wanted to be a thug. And so the attitude was really high. So we conversed back and forth a little bit. And finally he gets tired of talking, picks up that knife and takes 2 swings at me. And I turned into Gumby, right? And I just became super flexible. He missed me. I think he did 28 days of a 6-month sentence for aggravated menacing. Okay. So the prosecutor calls me and goes, hey, this guy's getting out of jail. I just think you should know. And I said, sir, all I've got is this pink piece of paper that says he can't come to my store. I'm not feeling really great about that. He goes, well, you should get a gun. So I was raised by Christian music teachers. And we weren't anti-gun. We were just non-gun. right? I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma where my dad was the minister of music and the marching band director. Everybody in town knew who I was because they knew who he was. We were in no danger. So we were non-gun. We weren't hunters or anything. Nothing against it. We just wasn't our thing, you know? So I went and got a gun, a Smith & Wesson 5906. And I went to the indoor range and shot 200 rounds a week was it Monday night or Friday? It was Monday night. I shot 200 rounds on a pop can on a string at 25 yards. And you want to learn how to shoot a pistol, you put a pop can on a string at 25 yards, you learn pretty quick what works and what doesn't. So then after that happened, they invited me to a bowling pin match, which is where you literally shoot at bowling pins. It's so much fun. And then after that, they said, hey, if you like that, you should come try Steel Challenge. I said, what Steel Challenge? He goes, don't worry about it. Just be here at 8 o'clock on Saturday. So I show up and now I'm shooting steel plates. Okay. Loving it. You know, when you hear the bullet hit that plate, you're used to shooting indoors and your bullet's actually doing something. It's really, really fun. And they said, well, if you like that, you should come try IPSC. What's IPSC? Don't worry about it. Just be here next Saturday, 8 o'clock. And I show up and now we're shooting paper targets and steel targets on the clock. And I just got hopelessly addicted to it. I had what's been referred to as the rage to master. And I literally, if I wasn't working or sleeping, I was dry firing probably 4 hours a day, some days. And then I got another gun, a slightly more competitive gun called Open Gun, which is all the bells and whistles. I've got one here somewhere I could show you. I'll show you later. I got that, and then I became even more addicted, right? So now I discovered there was this thing called Grand Master, which is the top 95th percentile on measurable skills. And you don't have to go to nationals. You don't have to go win a bunch of matches. You just have to demonstrate that you possess these skills. And I was able to do that in about 9 months, and I became the first Grand Master in Ohio. And then that's where middle management comes in, because I was dominating locally, but I was choking out of town. Right? Remember, this is the infancy of the internet. So I don't know anything other than what I'm seeing at my local matches. I don't know that there's guys in Indiana that are faster than I am. I don't know that my Grandmaster card doesn't mean that I'm not one of the best in the world. I think I am, but the first time I got beat out of town, my self-image took a hit. Right? I was for sure unconscious competent. I was just having fun. And I was practicing so hard that nobody locally could touch me. And I thought the same thing would be true out of town. And it wasn't.
A little different.
That's when I called your dad.
But did the guy ever show back up at your store?
No.
Thank goodness. Okay.
No, he sure didn't.
But you were ready just in case.
Well, back then the laws were interesting. Ohio didn't have a concealed carry law, but it did have a law that said, they called it the affirmative defense, and said that if you were found guilty of carrying a concealed weapon, but you had a really good reason, you might not go to jail. So that's kind of a weird environment in which to carry a gun. But no, we never had one.
I have a good reason. This piece of paper, this guy might do the opposite, okay?
Yeah, it's possible.
So that works out good. So fast forward a little bit. So you get into this competition shooting and you realize, okay, I'm not as good outside town as I am inside town, but I really want to get better outside town. Find middle management. So with that, what are some of the accomplishments you look back at and you say, man, I'm really happy about this or this? Do you have one that kind of sticks out?
Sure. The day I got my Grand Master certification was one of the top 5 happiest days of my life, because prior to all this, I was a guitar player in a rock and roll band, and we were this close to getting a record deal. We were mutual friends with Ted Nugent's manager, and we had a couple record labels calling us. And then when Nirvana came out with Smells Like Teen Spirit, I'm sure you remember that, the music industry changed overnight. I mean, and it was over. If you were a long-haired, good time, fun rock and roll band, they didn't want you. They wanted you in flannel, and they wanted you frowning, and they wanted albums with one-word titles and song. You know, like your album is Cake and your first single is Mud, right? Grunge, basically. And so I left the music business feeling like a failure. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I needed somebody's stamp of approval on me. I needed some sort of outside party to say, Anderson is awesome. So when I found out that I could be a Grand Master without traveling all over the world, I knew that was the thing, right? I didn't fully understand it back then, but that's obviously what it was. Like, I needed somebody's stamp of approval. The problem was I didn't have a goal after that. So when I got that Grand Master card, I knew I wasn't able to travel and go to all these big matches. I just couldn't afford it. Plus, working in retail, you never get a weekend off. So I didn't have another goal. I wanted to keep shooting, but there was no longer anything really driving me, right? So the way I got into instruction is I wrote a book. Here's my second book. This is the one that has the interview with your dad in it. This was when I was obsessed with Neo from The Matrix.
Yeah.
Right. But my first book, this one's a little worn. I have to apologize. Maybe it won't look too bad. But this book contains the 12 drills that I used to make Grand Master in 9 months. And the only reason that book exists was because people kept asking me how I did it. And I had the 12 drills written down on a piece of paper, and I would just hand it to them. And I got tired of doing that. So I decided to write a book. And you youngsters will need to Google Kinko's, because you don't know what Kinko's is. But I'd go to Kinko's once a week at 10 o'clock at night and make the books by hand on the copy machines. And then I'd just sell them out of my car or whatever. And then finally it got a proper cover. And I discovered, probably because I was raised by Christian music teachers, that I'm programmed to help more than I am to program to win. Right? Christian music teachers don't require victory. What they do require is your absolute best. That's what they require. And that's about it. You know, and if you win, that's great. If you come in third, that's great. Everybody gets a hug. But it's not a cutthroat, you must win at all costs. And I enjoyed winning, but to me, excellence was always more important. Right? If I went out and did the things that I knew I could do, I was pretty cool however I placed. What I enjoy now is when I do meet people who have to win, because there's two kinds of shooters. There's shooters that require excellence and they don't really care how they finish. And then there's shooters that require victory. They don't really care how they get there. And there's nothing wrong with either one of those. It's just two different personalities. But when I meet those people that have to win and they're prone to overtrying and things of that nature, I love helping them reach their goals. It's like a trophy every time. I have thousands of emails from people that have reached their goals. And similar to when Lanny decided his next goal would be to pay back his wife for all those years of support, my next goal is to help people reach their goals. And
and that'll be a goal that you'll take for the rest of your life. You'll be successful doing. So with that, let's just jump into your favorite principle. Do you have one, and what is it and why?
Think about, talk about, write about.
Principle reinforcement.
That's interesting for two reasons. Number one, it works so well it got me fired. And number two, it worked so well that I was able to come out of a very difficult financial period and buy a house 6 months later. Okay, I used talk about, write about to save $10,000 in 6 months. And going back to how it got me fired, we were running the record stores and CDs were starting to go away and downloading was starting to be a thing. Okay. Well, my boss was really interested in keeping great spreadsheets of failure. He was like, we got to keep all these details. And I'm like, wait a second. That's not why we're here. Right. So our stores at that time didn't have sales goals. So I used think about, talk about, write about. They had this sheet of paper where every hour they had to write down their sales. They had to go in the computer, write down their sales. So now instead of talking about vacuuming or what's for lunch, they're like, hey, it's noon. We're at 300. Our goal is 1,200. What are we going to do? So now when a customer comes in, they're treated as an opportunity instead of an obstacle to vacuuming, right? And I come up with this bonus program and I showed it to my boss and he said, this will never work. These guys are lazy. They're dumb. They're never going to do any of this stuff. I said, great. That means it won't cost you a dime to try it. He had no response.
In other words, boss is not an obstacle. This is an opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Love it.
He said, if it doesn't work, it won't cost you a dime. But it did work. Now, all of a sudden, these managers see this bonus as a reason to be more proactive in making better sales. He starts writing checks for $500. This goes on for 3 or 4 months, and he gets tired of writing checks.
But doesn't
Now,
he realize he's writing the checks because his profit is going up?
these checks represented less than 10% of the sales increase,
Wow.
but he didn't want to write them anymore. And so they came in and said, Steve, you've got the best market in the country, but your stores are sloppy, your reports are late. And some of these things were true. However, I think 80% of my stores were above goal, and the owner had set the goal. I didn't set the goal. The owner set the goal. And they got tired of writing those checks, and they eventually fired me, which is fine. So talk about part 2 was I had come out of a very bad relationship, and it caused me to move out of state. Most of the dumb things we do are for a girl, and that's what had happened. So I came back to Ohio, and I was broke. I was so broke that I wasn't filling up the car all the way. You ever been that broke where you're like, just put $6 in and see how far it'll get me. So I'm thinking about and talking about going broke. And all I can see is my checking account go down, and oh man, I got $87 and it's 4 days till payday. What am I going to do? And I'm constantly thinking about it. So then I woke up one day and I said, hang on a second, Anderson. You're an author. At this point, I'd written 3 books. You've written 3 books, including the book that invented the modern dry fire method for pistol. You need to be thinking about not getting another job. You need to be thinking about capitalizing on what you do. So I start thinking about ways I can use these books to make more money. And I start, my podcast got a lot more focused. So now instead of, Zen and the art of fluffy clouds in your shooting, it's 7 ways to get better now. Boom. People love lists. Mm-hmm. They just love you. 7 ways to do anything. People are all about it. What are the 7 ways? So I activated my marketing department, and every dime I made from AndersonShooting.com went into a savings account. And 10 months later, we bought a house with a shooting range on it. I'm sorry, 6 months later, we bought a house with a shooting range on it.
Very cool.
Just by changing what I was thinking about, talking about, and writing about. Because of course, that changes your behavior. And you can't just sit there in your room cross-legged and go, I want $10,000. But if you let that reinforce your behavior and change your behavior, particularly if it's something you can control, man, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, that's why the principle is called the principle reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know, that what he's talking about is more you think about, talk about, write about something happening, you improve the probability of that thing happening. And it's the principle that I ask all my clients to memorize. Mm-hmm. I do it for 2 reasons. 1, you just described it. It works. And 2, it's the longest one. So if you're going to have someone memorize something, why not have them memorize the longest one?
Well, to me, whatever you feed grows. So if you're feeding yourself positive imprints on things you really want to see happen, that's what you want to grow. Why would you want to feed yourself with imprints of the opposite of what you really want to have happen? It doesn't make any logical sense.
Well, I think people do it because I'm not going to call it a perfectionist society, but maybe that is the thing. There are people that treat anything less than perfection as failure. Mm-hmm. And so asking them to do a positive reinforcement on something they perceive as a failure, they think is getting a participation trophy. Type A is the worst. When I get SWAT officers, cops, attorneys, any sort of type A personality really resist the principle of reinforcement. Because if it ain't perfect, it's a failure. And we've had phenomenal success getting people to say, okay, I did 99% of this extremely well, and I can fix the 1%. That's a win, right? As opposed to I had 1 shot that didn't go where I wanted it to go, therefore I'm a failure. Makes no sense. But if you can get them to switch that around, once again, the sky's the limit.
Well, they have to understand how self-image grows and why self-image matters.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't understand that, it's going to be very difficult to take someone who's used to focusing on error, wanting to figure out what to fix, and to get them to switch that mindset. But if they understand self-image and how that really equals your performance, you're going to perform up to what your actual belief is, and understand how to change it, then the sky is really the limit for them, but they just don't always see it right away, I guess.
What's fascinating is they're already doing it in their professions. They're already doing it in some other area of their life. They just haven't figured out how to apply it to shooting. You know, one of my first questions whenever I have somebody who's got a poor self-image is I say, are you great at your job? Oh, I'm the best. And why do you believe that? Well, I have a long track record of success. So if he's a pilot, I say, have you ever seen a perfect landing? Oh, there's no such thing. But there's a lot of great ones. Okay, well, let's start with that. You know, if you have a guy who's in the financial world and he does a deal that's not perfect, but it's pretty great, he's still going to cash the check, right? Maybe he got 9 million instead of 10. He's still going to cash that check. So what they've got to do, I think, is cash the check. It may not be the check you want, but you still need to cash it. Mm-hmm. Well, that's pretty profound. I should write that down.
I
cash
like
the
that.
check.
I like that. You should cash the check.
7 ways to cash the check.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there we go.
Take the win. You know, people will write me all the time and they'll say, hey, Steve, I want to let you know I just won my first match. However, so-and-so and so-and-so didn't show up and it wasn't very competitive. All right, well, let me look up the results. Yep, you won. Take the win.
Yeah.
If you want it to happen again. If you don't want it to happen again, call it a loss. But if you want it to happen again, cash the check and take the win.
So, Steve, I've competed in one pistol competition in my life, and it was free pistol. And in free pistol, they take the top 8 shooters, make the final. And guess what I went in as? I finished 8th and made the final, and I came in the final 7th.
Hey, you moved up one. I like it.
Great.
Yeah. There was only 9 people that competed in the event, and the guy in 7th place went home and didn't shoot the final.
But no one knows that when you tell the story.
But if you don't do the Harvey, if you don't tell the rest of the story, it sounds great.
Oh, yeah.
But I think people do 2 things. One, they want to make sure that you know the rest of the story because they downplay their success, which hurts self-image. Mm-hmm. But number 2 is that we live, my saying is we live in the United States of negativity. And so people it's a custom or it's just socially acceptable in many sports to downplay things or to make things worse than they are. For example, if the 3 of us went and played golf, and let's say I had a great day, I said, man, I shot a really good score, but it could have been better if I didn't do this, this, and this. So I could have had a personal best, but I'm going to talk about the missed opportunities to have even better. And that's just socially acceptable to do. And then, of course, if we don't play well, what do? We talk about our failures a lot. It's just socially acceptable, especially in the shooting community. It's that way. In our sport, it's how many points did you drop? Not what your score was, but how much did you drop? And so with that, it just compounds it, and it makes it harder to build the self-image that you need to equal the skill that you have.
Yeah, and people think whenever we get into positive self-talk, people think that we're telling them to ignore their weaknesses. Nobody's saying anything about that. We're just saying improve them from a position of strength instead of a position of weakness. Instead of saying, I'm a lousy shooter because I missed 2 shots, say, hey, I'm a great shooter and I know how to make those last 2 shots. We're not saying ignore your weaknesses. I call it improving from competence in order to increase confidence, as opposed to improving from incompetence, which reduces confidence. Right? Let's start with competence. 2 of my favorite examples of that is when your dad decided to keep detailed records of all of his 8s, mm-hmm. and his 8 count went up. Right? Well, what if I keep detailed records of my 10s? My shooters, well, in our sports, most of them know far more about their worst match than they do about their best match. I want to know everything you can tell me about the best match you ever shot. Right? I don't need to hear about the worst one unless you want it to happen again. Then let's talk about it all day. But let's learn more about your absolute best performance so we get a recipe. Pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's too easy to talk about the negative or the bad. We need to get in the habit of talking more about the good. But what we're talking about is what we teach is we go against what's, human nature. it's human nature to do some of the things that you're talking about. We're going the opposite way. And so this goes back to, at the end of the day, what are we going to do? We're going to evaluate what we learned or what went well, as opposed to just talk about what we didn't like. So, yeah, it's not easy to do. Not easy to do. But that's life, though, in general. I think most businesses are that way. Most other sports are that way. School's that way.
I want to know, what's the most common question that you get from your students who are training on the mental game?
How come I can't get consistency? That's when they come see me, right? Because nobody wants to spend the money. They'll spend $10,000 average for a serious competition shooter, but they won't spend $300 to $500 on mental management. They know that it's the thing, right? And the other thing that happens is a lot of guys think they can outsmart it. And I haven't forgotten about your question, but consistency is always what they want. And a certain kind of person will learn mental management, have great success with it, and then want to go adding stuff to it, right? I'd imagine in their mind it's, hey, I did a really simple thing. I got a great result. Imagine how much better it'll be when I put some more effort on top of that. I had a few. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you have a really exciting thing coming up soon with our dad.
Yeah.
So I want to know a little bit about that and what this webinar series is going to entail. And I have the dates.
I can only tell you what I know. I had a 45-minute conversation with Lanny. Well, you want to talk about self-image? I get up Saturday morning. It's Lanny Bassham. I'm like, wow, pretty cool. But
what didn't even call us kids?
Yeah, no kidding. You're. I didn't hear from him Saturday.
Well, what it's going to be is a 3-part webinar on mental management for speed shooting.
Awesome.
Any shooting event where speed is a component. It's relatively simple to figure out how, and this is nothing against rifle shooters, but it's relatively simple to figure out how to shoot a straight bullet in a very controlled environment, right? Sight and trigger. And if there's something, bullet drop in some cases would be a factor, and wind, of course.
It's just hard to duplicate that.
Sure. I'm not saying it's easy. Okay. I'm not saying it's easy, but if they had a stopwatch on you and you had to fire that shot, not only have it be a 10, but faster than the next guy, that would change that sport a bunch.
Yeah. Right? We do have an event that does that, by the way.
Good.
Yeah.
So
we have a rifle, a speed rifle, but it's a military event in SISM. And, but you're right. It does change everything. When you have, 2 minutes a minute and a half to shoot 10 shots, bolt action, 300 meter. And then you got 2 minutes for standing and 2 minutes for kneeling. 2 minutes of kneeling seems like an eternity, compared to 2 minutes standing. But yeah, you're right. It definitely throws in a whole different element because you've got that clock in the back of your mind, which you normally don't have in precision sports. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, but it's more fun though, I will tell you.
When they put the clock on you, it changes things. And so it's a challenge for mental management because if a shooter consciously is choosing between speed and accuracy, they're always going to make the wrong choice. And that's what I was doing when I realized that there's something wrong up here. Some stages I'd be slow and accurate. Other stages I'd be a little fast and sloppy. And you can have just enough success with one of those to keep you on that path. But as the level of competition gets higher, that doesn't work anymore. So we have to figure out something else to do. And I'm really looking forward because I don't know how much Lanny knows about these sports. So I'm really excited to see how he comes into an environment where he hasn't done a lot of work and I have, and to see if we say the same things in our opinion. I'm sure our opinions are going to be very similar.
Oh, well, it'll be fascinating. It'll be fascinating because you'll be the expert on the sport, but he'll be the expert on the mental aspect. So it could be that he's bringing in an interesting perspective that you might be like, wow, that's going to help me in my coaching too. And so I think it's going to be really fun.
What I have found in doing the classes that I'm certified in is every time I do them, I learn something new. So Lanny's interesting because Lanny doesn't beat the dead horse with a broken record. He's going to tell you one time. Whereas if I think something's important, I'm going to talk about it for an hour. Lanny's going to tell you once. And so all these little nuggets, like even something as simple as the principle of reinforcement. When I first started, I thought reinforcement was just a fancy word for after, right? Mm-hmm. This is what happens after. And then about the third or fourth time, I went, wow, every thought we have when we get done is going to be reinforced. So this isn't after. This is, okay, I'm going to think about whatever I think about is more likely to happen the next time I go do this thing, right? It's just growing and growing and growing. So every time I do it, I learn something, and I'm sure I'll learn something this time too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You better come with your pen and paper.
So I have 4 legal pads of the week I spent with him. 4.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Up until 3 o'clock, then it's done. We're done. Nothing after 3.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right. What has been your biggest takeaway as a coach? You talk about learning and things that you've learned from coaching. What's been your biggest takeaway?
Probably the change from no, not like that, to good job, try again.
I like that.
That's the biggest change I've made, because when I do classes on the range, you've got everything from somebody who's just getting started to somebody who's in the middle of a pack, and I've gotten extremely good at managing those different skill levels. And most of the time, when you go to a coach, the first thing they're going to do is give you the list of everything you're doing wrong. And I used to do the same thing. Okay, this is wrong, that's wrong, this is wrong, we need to fix that. And it's not necessarily the end of the world, but when I changed it to good job, try again, I got a lot more smiles and a lot less frowns. Mm-hmm. Right? So now instead of this is wrong, that's wrong, it's good job, try again. There's a lot of good stuff going on here. Let's look at a couple of things over here and it'll get even better. So that's been the biggest change. Good job, try again.
Got a lot more comebacks.
Yeah.
They keep coming back.
Yeah. Well, and it's tough because if you were to come to one of my classes and you wanted to get started in one of these shooting sports, and I have a master class shooter in there, he's going to do things already that you might not even believe are possible, right? Like drawing from a holster and firing 6 shots in under 2 seconds. Most people don't even think that's possible. Well, every master class shooter can do that on demand, right? So you've got to balance your comparison to him with your own stuff. And if the coach is saying, hey, you're never going to be able to do this, well, now you've just sealed your fate. But if you say, hey, wouldn't you like to know how that guy did that? Yeah, I would like to know how that guy did that.
Yeah, but there's too many coaches that do tell people, well, you'll never get there. You'll never do that.
Well, that's not going to be very profitable. And number 2, everybody has a right to their level of participation, right? If you want to go shoot a match a month just to have fun, nobody in the world can tell you that's not a good plan, right? You're probably not going to be regionally competitive, but you probably already know that with that level of participation, right?
Yeah, and if you didn't have those people, sports would die.
Right.
You wouldn't have enough participation. So you got to start somewhere. That's why we make a big point as far as what your participation level is. Are you trying to learn, trying to compete, trying to win? Not everyone is starting out wanting to compete right away. They just want to have fun. I mean, look at your example. I just want to get a gun to protect myself. And next thing you know, you're shooting for fun. Next thing you know, you're competing. Next thing you know, you're trying to win Grand Master. Mm-hmm. And so once you get that victory, then all of a sudden it's okay, now what? So one leads to the other, but there's nothing wrong with someone who wants to stay in one category and never go to another one. I think it's perfectly fine. People want to learn a sport just to have fun and go out with their buddies, and they're going to competitions, but they're not competing with everyone. They're just saying, hey, I just want to know how well I can do. Yeah. I think that's great. At least they set the appropriate thing to do.
So for people who could be watching this and not know anything about your sport but fascinated with it, how do they get started?
So all you need to do is go to USPSA.org and just find a match. And I would recommend most people go look at a match before they try to shoot it. And then you want to find, and you could take your gear with you, put it in your trunk, and then you want to find the match director when it's over and say, hey, I am brand new to this. What do I need to know? And a really good match director will say, go put on your gun and come with me, right? Others might say, well, let's take a look, you know, but most of the match directors love new shooters because we need them. And it's really fun to get somebody hooked on this stuff. So I would just say, go to a match and watch it. There's inside of this, there's USPSA, there's IDPA, which is the International Defensive Pistol Association. Those exercises tend to be what we think are a little bit more realistic in terms of self-defense. That was the whole idea is, you know, you don't want to go get in a gunfight to practice being in a gunfight, but we can duplicate some of the scenarios we think we might see, carjacking, ATM robbery, things of that nature. It's not super realistic, but it's more realistic than some of the other ones. And the easiest one, the best one to get started in is what's called Steel Challenge, where you can bring virtually any gun you want, stand in one spot and shoot 5 steel plates. That's it. There's no moving, there's no reloading on the clock. And you only have to draw from a holster if you don't want to. You can actually start with the gun in what's called low ready, just holding it down here and then bringing it up. That's the best one to get started in. If you own a gun of any kind and you can find a Steel Challenge match, that's the one to go to.
There you go, Heather. We're going to go Steel Challenge.
Okay. I actually think that would be really fun. I would need to practice first.
We could
'cause I don't-
videotape it and probably make a comedy section out of it.
Well, if I'm there, yeah.
I can refer you to 2 super, super crazy fun female shooters who would take you under their wing. They're not quite PG-13. They're a little bit more R-rated. So but you would have the time of your, and I know a ton of people in your area. You've got a range pretty close to you called Mission 160. And I've been up there a bunch, and I could hook you up with people that would take you under their wing. And to quote my mom, you'd have the best time. You'd love it.
I may have to do that. Yeah. I'm excited now. My husband would be so excited if I wanted to go shoot. I'd make him happy.
Make it
And that-
happen.
Yeah. Maybe that's a sport we could do together. We keep talking about how we need a hobby we could do together.
It would
and we don't
fit.
have one.
It would fit your word of the year.
Active. My
She
word
wants
of-
to be active this year. What more active can you be than to go try some shooting?
Yeah.
And think about what you could do from a mental management perspective. Here you are, a mental management expert, right? You're learning a new sport, but you've got an advantage. You know how to get positive imprints while you're doing it. You know that's important. You may have to deal with a little bit of emotion as you struggle a little bit in the beginning. And it'd be fascinating for you to do a podcast on Heather is learning to shoot Steel
Oh
Challenge.
my goodness.
This is my journey.
That might be fun.
Heather's Journey,
Oh my.
Part 1, Steel Challenge.
Okay. All right. That might be super fun. If anybody wants to see me do that, just comment on this podcast episode, and we'll see. Maybe I can be encouraged.
I'm going to be in that area in March, working with one of my IDPA guys who just got put on Team Beretta. This guy, his name's Ben Hart. He was actually there, Troy. You probably met him when I was in your office. Big, tall guy with the Beretta hat. He was number two. He comes and takes mental management, and he's sitting there with his arms crossed the whole time going, yeah. And then eventually he started nodding because he realized that he's applied these things to his autocross career, but he didn't know what he did to apply it to shooting. Right. So he goes and wins his next state match pretty soon. Now he's on Team Beretta as a sponsored shooter, living the dream.
That's so cool.
But I'm going to be up there working with him in March, middle of March. So we might have to get together and do something.
That sounds like a plan.
Make it happen.
All right. Sounds good. Help me be active.
As opposed to, it's my first day at this, I'm no good. It turns into good job, try again. And with Steel Challenge, it's either going to be sight or trigger. And as soon as you can figure out, and it might be both in the beginning, depending on, what kind of gun you have and, some other stuff. But typically it's either sight or trigger is the only problem you're going to have.
You can utilize mental management in everything that you do, in your relationships, in your work, in your personal growth, in your sport, everything.
So I discovered something so fascinating. I've discovered it a few times, probably because I didn't write it down in my journal, but I have 2 Great Danes and a Doberman Pinscher that I have to walk every day. Okay. That is 200, 300, that's about 400 pounds of dog that I have to walk. And I walk them through the woods, and it's a very target-rich environment for excited dogs. And I'm trying to control these leashes. They're going in 3 different directions. And I learned that my preload for that dog walk determined how well it was going to go. And preload is what you think about before the action, any action, right? And I noticed on days where I thought, man, this is going to be a nightmare. It's rainy, it's muddy. Oh, it's going to be the worst dog walk ever. Sure enough, I struggled. It was miserable. I said, wait a second. And then, of course, you get done and you go, that was the worst dog walk ever. So now my principle of reinforcement is bad, right? So I thought, well, wait a second. I'm getting a workout. My dogs are getting what they need. It's a nice enough day. Let's go for a walk. And then as I'm walking, I just sing whatever song I heard on the radio last. So now I've occupied my conscious mind, right? I'm no longer actively I'm just walking dogs, and I get done and go, wow, what a great dog walk. And it sounds kind of silly as an analogy, but it's true in every aspect of our lives. Something that you expect to go poorly is probably going to go poorly. Something that you expect to go well, we can't promise it's going to go well, but the probability of it going well is much higher if we expect it to go well.
One last question for you there, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
What is a piece of advice that you've either been given or that you have given that you feel like has made a big impact on you or others?
Wow. So I lost my dad when I was pretty young. I think I was like 10 or 11. And I remember him telling me something that I suppose a lot of fathers have told their sons, but he told me that if you find something you love to do, you'll never feel like you're working. And here I am, I've always turned my hobbies into professions. My first job was at a guitar store selling guitars. After that, I was working in music stores, record stores. So I've always had a job with something I was passionate about. And that makes it a lot easier. And Troy, one thing I want to ask you real quick, or at least tell you, in your 12 elements of elite performance, I find it very interesting that passion solves the other 11. With the possible exception of self-image, passion will literally, if it's present enough, it's going to account for all the other 11, I think. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's probably why I started with that. The first chapter is all about passion.
Mm-hmm.
The elite level athletes are passionate about what they do. And it's not just what they do, they're passionate about how they do it, like the process of doing it, And so I start with that, and you look at the great ones. The best example that you can probably get is the great one, Wayne Gretzky in hockey. I mean, here's a guy that was doing things when he was a kid because he just loved doing it. And he happened to be really, really good at it. And if you just take him, you can look at every chapter and see an example from him. Now just take another sport, plug in that great one, and I bet you they're going to have all 5 of those things. And within those 5 things are the 12 elements you're talking about. But it goes back to, you were talking about the one word, rock bands and songs. I think the same with titles of books. That's why I named it Attainment and then did a subtitle of the 12 elements. Because
if
in order to
done that subtitle, I never would have read that book.
Yeah. So the attainment is because people want to accomplish things, but they don't want to become the individual that it takes to get it. But if you become the individual it takes to get it, the accomplishment usually follows. So with that, you've got these elements that these people, there's these, and I'm not saying you have to have all 5 of those things to be good or great at what you do. I'm just saying what I noticed when you look at the top 5 percenters, they all have them. They'll have all 5 of those things that take advantage of those things. But man, if you got 3 or 4 of them, you're off to a good start. And I like what you said. If you are passionate about what you do, you enjoy it. So it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like the day goes by quicker. It goes by easier. And the day that you're like, man, I'm looking at my clock. Man, I got 4 more hours of this. That's when it gets hard. But if you're in a profession that you're passionate about and you look at your clock and, oh my gosh, it's already 2 o'clock. I only got 2 more hours to go. Like, where did the time go? So yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a huge, huge one. And, you look at it, there's a lot of people doing things that they're not passionate about. They might be good at it, but they're really not. And to me, they might like doing it. But the difference between liking and being passionate is that if you're passionate about something, you'll never talk yourself out of doing it that day. If you like doing it, you might talk yourself out of it that day.
It's the difference between waking up saying, I get to go to work, and waking up saying, I have to go to work.
Right.
There's the difference. I get to go to work every day. I get this amazing opportunity to talk to cool people like Steve Anderson. It's fun. It's my favorite.
So my favorite example is Eddie Van Halen. And I can't talk about him in the past tense yet, so I'm not going to. But Eddie Van Halen, notorious for saying, I don't practice. And of course, nobody believes that. But Valerie Bertinelli one time said, practice. I don't know if it's called practicing or not, but he never puts the guitar down.
Yeah. We interviewed Bobby Rock not too long ago, one of the top, drummers and rock. And, we didn't know what he did in the teaching element. Fascinating guy, but he literally plays all the time. Mm-hmm. It's like if I don't have drumsticks in my hand, I don't know what I'm doing. It's kind of like if I don't have a guitar pick, I don't know what I'm doing. If I don't have a rifle in my hand, when I was competing in the day, it was like I'm missing an arm. It's just who you are, what you do, and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I agree with you on that one.
And I just don't know, man. When I was really getting serious about shooting, I didn't know what I was doing. And the only thing I ever did was I took what I knew about playing guitar and I put it on the gun. Thought I may not be able to do this today, but I know if I keep at it, I'll eventually be able to do it. So call that, I don't know. I didn't know it, but I was reinforcing the idea that I will be able to do this. Doesn't need to happen today, but I am making progress. And my self-image only grew because I started beating people, and that's pretty cool. And again, victory was never the most important thing to me, which is why I was not a national champion. If that had been my next goal, I promise you I would have achieved it. It just wasn't that important to me, but looking back at it now, it was passion that carried me through all the other things I didn't know about. So I think it solves time management, right? Yeah. Now it may throw the rest of your life out of whack a little bit, but it's for sure going to benefit the activity,
Yeah, I talked to an 8th grader yesterday. He's passionate about getting out of 8th grade and into high school. He's like,
I think most 8th graders are.
He's like, I want to get out of this. I'll do anything to get out. I'm driven.
Pay value.
Huge.
Pay value, huge. Like my grades were terrible my senior year. I had A's in English and I had A's in music theory, and I was struggling, because I'm like, algebra, this is ridiculous. I'm never going to use this. But what I did realize is if I get held back and I don't graduate, I'm not going to be able to be active in my band because they'll be out of school and I'll be in school. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to get out of high school.
So if people want to get a hold of you, Steve, what's your contact info?
The email address is steve@andersonshooting.com. That's my preferred method of communication because all the different social platforms have messaging apps and they can be a little difficult to keep track of. So Steve at andersonshooting.com is the best way to get a hold of me.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for spending the time with us and coming on and giving us some of your wisdom. I'm super excited about all the takeaways. We're going to put in the comments here, we're going to put the link to the webinar series that you're doing with Lanny and how to get a hold of you. And maybe if you can find that video, or if there's a video of you doing your singing or music with shooting, or
I can send you two things I did. Number one, I did a parody of Poison's song "Every Rose Has Its Thorn."
Oh, okay, I got to see that.
Every shooter has their flaws. That's a pretty funny one. And then I did another one called "Call the Shot," because we've taken a lot of detours away from shooting, and people may have got into this for shooting. What happens when the timer goes off is you get whatever is on your mind when that timer goes off. And you can cycle through. I figured out a speed shooter can probably entertain 6 to 8 thoughts per second. Okay. But only one at a time, as you guys know, right? So what I encourage shooters to do, and what I use mental management to help them do, is to make everything they're doing subconscious, so they can think about something else. And I don't tell them not to think about the thing, because as you know, the principle of the picture says not thinking about the thing is the same thing as thinking about the thing, right? It's the same. If somebody's trying to quit smoking, thinking about not smoking is the same thing as thinking about smoking. But if you think about chewing gum, that changes the channel.
It's like, don't think about pink elephants.
That's right. Boom, there it is. I use mental management to get them to understand, number one, when they had their best performance is when they were doing it. They just don't know how to replicate it, or they don't trust it enough, right? I had a shooter who just last week, he won his local match for the first time. Get this, just by watching his sights. Who knew, right? Subconscious stage plan, not thinking about results, just thinking about what he needed to see. He won his match. So he made the mistake that so many people make. He's like, wow, that went really well. If I can do that a little bit faster, it'll be even better. And of course, that wakes up the conscious mind, and all that great stuff that just happened goes away. Now, he's smart enough to know, he realized it as soon as it was over. So he was able to self-diagnose and learn that. But that's the most common mistake is, hey, this works really great. I'm going to add a bunch of stuff to it.
We've learned a lot talking to you today. We're super excited to continue talking to you for our Patreon members. If you're not already a Patreon member, we invite you to join us. We have so much fun with our additional content. Go ahead and like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and we look forward to seeing you next time.